you wanna get right to the core. So you wanna know what it's all for. So you wanna come off knowing more. Well, you better get hip. The podcast by George. So you wanna get straight to the show. So you wanna know what you need to know. You wanna know what we're all here for. Well, you better get hip. The podcast by George. Podcast by George. Podcast by George. He knows what he's fighting for. It's podcast by George. Podcast by George. Wanna know what we're fighting for?
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome back into another podcast by George. Well, it's time to get him back on. One of my favorite guests, Matthew Ho, is coming back on podcast by George. And the reason for it this time, it's more of an excuse, really, just to get him back on the show, but it's a great reason. He just authored a letter to the editor out there where he's at in North Carolina, to the Raleigh News and Observer, about the misuse of this CARES money being used for the Pentagon, believe it or not. And you've heard me bitching about this CARES money on the podcast before. And, of course, the military-industrial complex we're always talking about, and we're going to get to that with Matthew Ho. But let me start off for the people that aren't familiar with Matt. I want to read just a short version of his bio this time. Matt's got, when this was written, he had 12 years experience with America's war overseas with the United States Marine Corps, Department of Defense, and State Department. He was a senior fellow with the Center for International Policy from 2010 to 2020. In 2009, Matthew resigned in protest from his post in Afghanistan with the State Department over the American escalation of the war. So, okay, let me stop right there. Matt, come on in here and tell us now. The Afghanistan papers have since been published. And if anybody didn't know before, that tells me that you were right. The State Department was wrong in that dispute. Have you gotten apologies? I mean, have you heard from anybody in the State Department saying, hey, Matt, you had that right, we had that wrong, anything like that?
No, nothing like that. Nothing official, or they didn't send me, a watch, or they're not going to have a parade for me or anything like that. We should have listened to this guy. He was right all along. Interestingly, when I did resign, though, there were a lot of people within the State Department and within the Pentagon and within the National Security Council who agreed with me, including Ambassador Eikenberry, who was the ambassador to Afghanistan at the time, Richard Holbrooke, who was the president's special envoy for Afghanistan, Pakistan. Those two men agreed with what I had written, what I said, why I was resigning, as well as a lot of my peers. When that resignation occurred, the reporter who wrote the story for the Washington Post, I said to her afterwards, why did you write such a big story? Why did you, put this, because the story was like an above the fold front page, expose, like 3,000 words, big deal, and why did you do this? And she said, because everyone I asked at the State Department, at the Pentagon, at the White House, et cetera, none of them said you were wrong. Most of them agreed with you, so there was this kind of conspiracy of silence, this, even though they knew what was, and I heard this over and over again over the years. I got to be friends. I was friends with the man who was the State Department representative to NATO, and in Brussels. And so when at NATO, when the escalation of the Afghan war in 2009, when that plan was going around NATO, everyone disagreed with it, he said. And then Jack told me that, but when it came time to initial next to the initial next to the plan and an agreement, everybody did it, So it was just there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, we could do a whole show on that, but on why people go along with things, what they disagree with. There's a lot of reasons for it, but certainly, and it certainly doesn't feel good to be right about it, right? It was a complete waste and untold number of dead and suffering. And, I think Afghans are once again now the biggest refugee group in the world, since many of the Syrians have gone back to Syria. Afghans are the biggest refugee group in the world. And, it's been, I certainly, when I resigned in 2009, I didn't think we'd be here in 2020 still talking about it.
Well, and that war is still going on. I think people are aware of that, hopefully, but we're 19 years into that. Matt talked about a gold watch. I think Jimmy Dore says the Afghan war is about to get a gold watch. It'll be 20 years next year that we've been in Afghanistan. And I'll tell my viewers this, the part about this, and you hear me talk all the time about, are they too dumb or are they in on it? When I was doing the news back in the 80s, who was in Afghanistan? The Russians. Okay, we see a lot of news coverage about the Russians now, but not in this context. And I remember, as a matter of fact, that's the first time I even heard Kabul. I didn't even know where it was. But I mean, I remember reading that in the news, having to get out a globe to figure out what was going on in Afghanistan. And people were laughing about the fact that the Russians had been bogged down, that they'd been mired in Afghanistan, how stupid they were based on the history of this quagmire in the sand that had been going on for, my God, as long as anybody's known about Afghanistan in this part of the world, basically. So this is nothing new. We're still doing it. The State Department was wrong. Matthew Ho was right. Matt's been on every news outlet in the United States and in the world at one time or another. Now, the State Department is still on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes and people like that. Every night they're talking on MSNBC. They're on Fox News all the time. They're citing those sources. And because you were right on the Afghanistan war, this major military incursion going into its 20th year, they're having you on all the time. You've been on MSN, you're on the Rachel Maddow show regularly, right, Matt? I mean, are you on Fox? Or are they talking to you about Afghanistan these days?
Oh gosh, I could tell stories about all that. Well, first of all, let me say congratulations on your 200th episode.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Yeah. You reminded me to talk about dates and everything. And one of the things too, I think people should remember with the Afghan war is that for the United States, it's been almost 20 years of being directly involved in combat there. But for the Afghan people, it's been more than 40 years. And, the United States started funding the rebel groups in Afghanistan prior to the Soviet Union's invasion. If you read Bob Gates's memoirs or Zygmunt Brzezinski's memoirs, there was a plan hatched in 1979 by the Carter administration to send money and to these rebel groups that were upset with the government in Afghanistan to cause a revolution, basically to cause uprisings, to cause insurgency that would then bait the Soviet Union into invading. And they were successful. It was a successful plan, right? Short term, we gave the Soviets their Vietnam. Those are exactly the words that Zygmunt Brzezinski and other people in the White House use. Give the Soviets their own Vietnam. Of course, 40 years later, here we are still dealing with this. So, a lot of these people that we hold up as being brilliant or as chess players or however you want, because Zygmunt Brzezinski had a reputation up until his death of being, this man who almost had like a crystal ball, and he was wrong, so tragically wrong so often, but he was never called out for it. And the media, we could definitely talk about my experiences with them, and and I've heard you say this on this podcast, George, how much it's changed. And particularly in the last 5 or 6 years, it's been since 2014 that I've been on any of the networks. Stop. They have. Really gone to a model, I believe, that if you are not on Team Red or Team Blue, that if you're not going to get on there and somehow put politics into it, somehow shade this so that there is someone out there who's watching who's getting upset, someone who's out there who's watching who's cheering, if you're not doing something to help their rating system, they really don't want you on. And not just me. When you do these shows, when you're on, you get to know different people who are in the green rooms, with you, waiting to go on, different experts or whatever. That happened to a lot of us. I recall very clearly when MSNBC shifted to that model. They began doing that around 2012. They launched their Lean Forward campaign, as they called it,
yes,
and really embraced that we are the Democratic version of Fox. They up until that point, I think everyone had recognized MSNBC has falls a certain way in their coverage. But around 2012 or so, MSNBC really went all in and said, we're going to do the Fox model. And it's been successful for them, money wise, rating wise, advertising wise. It has been very successful. And then, of course, with, as everyone knows, 2015, Donald Trump starts running for president, and these cable networks see their ratings just explode, see their profits, better than they've ever had them. As Les Moonves, he's out at CBS now, but I believe it was Moonves who said, Donald Trump may be bad for America, but he's great for CBS News.
Yeah, that was him. Yeah.
Yeah. He's somebody who people aren't familiar. He's somebody who got taken down as part of the Me Too movement, deservedly. I guess he was a scumbag.
That's working great for them.
Yeah,
but it ain't working great for us, folks, and it's on both sides of the equation. Rachel Maddow says that her mentor and friend was Roger Ailes. This model is being adopted by both of these adversarial media platforms, and it's purposeful, and it's resulting in what we're in the midst of today. And my God Almighty, what a mess. Well, talk about that.
And Rachel Maddow is probably the one who's the most disappointing to me. When I had in 2009, when my story broke and I was just on television all over the place and being hounded, I was up in New York City, and she really wanted me on her show, and I had to return back to DC. And I said, I can't be there. I can't stay the night, et cetera. And she had her producer literally follow me, stalk me throughout New York. Literally, that's what it was. Every time, I swear, I'm not making this up. Every time I turned around, this lady was there. And so finally I said, okay, I'll figure something out. If you guys can get me a hotel room, and change my train ticket, et cetera. And then I was on, and she is really, one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. One of those people that when you meet them, you can feel that intelligence.
She's a Rhodes Scholar. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You can feel that intelligence coming out of her. And she has been so disappointing in the last 7 years or so.
Well, she's not dumb. She's in on it. And I'll say this in her defense, and it really, as you'll hear me say, it's not really a defense. And I get maybe accused of not being politically or socially correct or a misogynist or whatever. But I put it in this context. Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. Hillary Clinton was going to be a champion of women's rights, of LGBT rights, she was going to come in and change the world for people like Rachel Maddow, and she was going to win hands down, according to people like Nate Silver. There was going to be no issue with this. She had hand-selected through this Pied Piper philosophy Donald Trump to run against her. My God, the antithesis of everything that they saw in Hillary Clinton. This was a guy that bragged about grabbing women by the pussy. He had gone and married a supermodel. He had multiple divorces. He was, a misogynist of the highest order. And so, believe it or not, and I think he couldn't even believe it on election night, Donald Trump got elected. And when he did, even a Rhodes Scholar, even somebody as brilliant and as smart as Rachel Maddow, lost her mind. Donald Trump broke the mind of Rachel Maddow, who is the leader of MSNBC, of their ratings, and I think of their newsroom and their programming and everything else. And we have seen nothing else but this crazy-ass perspective on the world and on the Russians and on Donald Trump ever since election night 2016, and maybe even before that, going back a ways, as you mentioned. That's my take, and it ain't real popular.
No, it is.
Let me tell you.
It's very disappointing. And I know you watch Jimmy Dore as well, and Jimmy talks about this quite a bit. Where with Rachel Maddow, you start making $30,000 an episode or whatever it is. It has an effect on you.
Sure,
it has an effect on people. And Rachel Maddow, one of the things that I realized as I was getting to meet members of Congress in 2009, 2010, and work with them on the Afghan war and on other issues, was how many of them, on the Democratic side, watched Rachel Maddow. She seemed to be like the one that, because she was so good, she was so intelligent, and then she just, hit this, like you said, the last several years, I heard somebody describe her as, refer to her as becoming like Glenn Beck. with particularly with the Russiagate stuff and all this, that again, with the Russiagate stuff, you just had a great episode with Aaron Mate that, everyone should listen to. I posted it and I said, like, if you are looking for, I really thought that your discussion with Aaron, George, was the best explanation of 2020 and 2016 in general, kind of 40,000 foot terms. What's happened? I said, if you're out from outside the U.S. or even if you're here in the U.S. and you want an explanation of what's occurred and what is occurring, listen to this half hour because it really is instructive. And it is amazing. With the Russiagate stuff, though, what I was going to say was that, we just saw that with the tax returns, the Trump tax returns that the New York Times published, there was no business with Russia, but the people keep grasping to it because I think, like you said, it offers an explanation as to why Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, which, I think everybody is still flabbergasted by. Everyone is still having a hard time understanding how could you lose to Donald Trump? But it happened. And I'm really afraid that the Democrats are going to lose again. I'm really afraid that, they're repeating a lot of the same mistakes they made in 2016, that they are already saying, look, we're so far ahead in the polls, and I'm really worried that we're going to have another 4 years of Trump.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm extremely worried too. And it's because they are bound and determined to try to peel off this select few thousand people in these swing state Rust Belt areas to try to get them to win for Biden, instead of appealing to the 100 million people that don't vote, a huge percentage of which did vote for Barack Obama in 2008 because he promised them stuff. They won't promise because they won't deliver, because of their donors and because of who they are, basically moderate Republicans, regardless of the Democratic Party label, and so on and so on. Well, I'm running out of time already. I got to get to this because your letter in the Raleigh paper out there reminds me of, I'm a hockey player. That's what I do for fun. I used to before the pandemic, Matt. I'm a senior league hockey player. And
are those your real teeth?
Yeah, they are. I wear a shield. I wear a mask, so I got to keep the choppers. But the point is, if you're ever on a team now in modern day hockey, you have video judges and or not video judges, video coaches, and they show you like a goal being scored, but they don't focus on that so much. They always back it up, the video, to what happened before that, and even what happened before that. That's the teaching experience. Well, I saw your letter in the Raleigh paper, and that is a perfect example. Now, I talked about this CARES thing, and I've talked about it ever since it first came down. But a lot of people now are seeing the result of this money going to the top, going to these corporations and to the Pentagon, for God's sake, and how that is being misused all the way down to the point where people at the bottom aren't getting anything. Now, in this instance, I want you to talk about this with the Pentagon, but my perspective on this, and I tell everybody, is it's just back the tape up a little bit. Look at this. The problem is because you used that methodology with the distribution of this money. It should have gone into the hands of the people. It should never have gone into the hands of the corporations and the Pentagon, because if it does, then you don't do what everybody's doing, and the Democrats, the neolibs in particular. Oh, we need oversight. There's not enough oversight. Okay. You can't have oversight. The IRS is oversight. Donald Trump hasn't paid a tax in 10 years, apparently. How's that working for you? I mean, I'm telling people, God, you can't oversight this stuff. Do it the right way, and you don't have to worry about oversight. But anyway, this is really a head scratcher. I mean, this is amazing what you've discovered with this Pentagon funding. Tell us about this.
Well, what occurred, the headline was last week in the Washington Post that about roughly $750 million that the Congress had appropriated to be used by the Pentagon to purchase personal protective equipment and medical equipment and other supplies that the American people need to protect themselves from the coronavirus. Well, that money was given to the Pentagon to purchase those things, and the Pentagon gave about $750 of that $1 billion to defense contractors for jet engines, for spare parts, for dress uniforms, and a host of other things completely unrelated to the pandemic. So it's a very clear example of the rot and the corruption and the grift that exists within the military industrial complex, the system. And this is on top of, there are other issues relating to the CARES Act and the Pentagon. One, the defense contractors have received some other money, whether it be through the Small Business Administration or through programs like the personal or the Paycheck Protection Program. So the defense industry has been taking money out of the CARES Act as well through those things. Which makes no sense, right? Because those defense contractors are still getting their contracts paid by the government.
Yes.
They're not like my friend's coffee shop that only can serve people outside right now, is operating off of 1/10 of the business they usually are. No, these defense industry contractors, these massive corporations, most that probably don't pay taxes just like Donald Trump does. I mean, like with the whole tax thing, my God, about 100, at least 100, we don't know because some of those tax records are hard to get, but at least 100 of the top companies in the United States, like Exxon and Amazon and FedEx, et cetera, don't pay any taxes, just like Donald Trump doesn't pay taxes. I mean,
and
so
we
the whole
gave
thing
them money.
Yeah, the whole thing is
$5 trillion.
Yeah.
And the instance of the Pentagon, and you pointed this out on the earlier podcast, a lot of that money has always gone to those contractors. A lot of it is unaccountable. It's off the books. They failed the first and only audit that they ever had. And I cite that statistic by Lee Camp. I don't know if it's still valid or not, but he said $21 trillion went missing. And so you would author a CARES Act to benefit Americans in a pandemic, and you would give money to the Pentagon. Yeah.
Well, this was so egregious too, because it was supposed to be for N95 masks, I think for gowns, for things that, maybe ventilators. I'm not sure the complete specifics. I know the masks were part of it. This was to build up a stockpile, right? This was to protect Americans. And the thing to remember about this is, with the exception of World War I, World War II, and the Civil War, if you add together all of America's wars, the 200,000 to 203,000 Americans who died from COVID far surpass the amount of Americans killed in all wars, except for the world wars and the civil wars. So if you add up Mexican-American War, the Revolution, Spanish-American War, Vietnam, Iraq, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, more Americans have died of COVID than all those wars combined. And yet we continue to spend about 55 cents on every of your about 55 cents of every tax dollar you send in April of your income tax goes to the Defense Department. And that doesn't include money that also goes to the Department of Energy for nuclear weapons, which is about $20 or $30 billion. The Veterans Administration, which gets about $200 billion a year. The Homeland Security budget, which is about $50 billion a year. The State Department gets about $75 billion a year. If I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think that's about right for state. And if anyone doesn't know about the State Department, literally their primary job in many countries these days is selling American weapons. That is the prime job of many people in a United States embassy, is to sell weapons. I mean, so it is an arm of the Pentagon and the defense industry. And then the thing that really makes people fall out of their chairs when they hear this is that each year now, just in debt and interest payments alone, the United States is spending $150 billion. So the third largest line item on the U.S. federal government's discretionary budget, not including Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, but your discretionary budget, where your income taxes go to, is interest and debt payments on past wars and past military spendings. You have Department of Defense spends they're getting about $745 billion a year now. The Veterans Administration gets more than $200 billion, about $225 billion a year. And then we spend $150 billion a year just on interest and debt payments for past military spending and wars. It's amazing. We've spent it's now about $800 billion just in interest payments the United States has spent on the Iraq and Afghan wars. right? I mean,
And I'm beginning to
$100
wonder
billion,
whether or not-
right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's just, and if people want more information on this, Harvard, Rutgers, UMass Amherst have all done great work on this, but the people who are really doing the best work on this is at the Watson Institute at Brown University, the Costs of War Project. So please go and look up their work, because their work is really tremendous, and you'll see just how much we're spending on not just on buying these planes and ships and dress uniforms rather than N95 masks and ventilators, but what we're spending on all the things in the past that we purchased, for the military and for our wars.
As I mentioned, not to count the money that we can't count, that we can't find. It makes me wonder what.
Oh, and that doesn't include. And then the intelligence agencies receive between $75 and $100 billion a year in what's called black money, dark money. That's completely unaccounted for. That's completely there's no oversight on that. Anyone who thinks Congress is doing any oversight in the intelligence agencies is just crazy. So I mean, there's that money too that's going into the intelligence agencies.
Well, we're out of time. I knew this would happen. I mean, I got to get him back on here again soon, folks. I want to end. I didn't get through the entire bio here, and it's the short version. I want to finish this because this Maddow, not only just a pontificator. This is not an armchair guy. He's a boots on the ground guy, folks. He knows what he's talking about. Prior to his assignment in Afghanistan, Matthew took part in the American occupation of Iraq, first in 2004-05 in Salah ad-Din province with the State Department Reconstruction and Governance Team, and in 2006-07 in Anbar province as a Marine Corps company commander. And of course, when not deployed, Matthews worked on Afghanistan and Iraq war policy and operation issues at the Pentagon and State Department, which we were talking about, and that was from 2002 to 2008. Well, Rachel Maddow may not be running you down, Matt, but we're going to get you back on here again very soon. Fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Yeah.
Thanks for coming back on, pal. Folks, that's Matthew Ho, and we're out of time for today, but if you like this, please go to podcastbygeorge.com, pick the platform that you want to follow us on, and of course, it's easy to do it on YouTube. Just hit the subscribe button, the like button there. Follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. That's going to do it for today, though. That's all there is, folks, and there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.